On the night of August 15, 1977, a radio telescope in Delaware, Ohio was doing what it had been doing every night for 3 years, scanning the sky, listening, waiting for something that didn't sound like Earth. Night after night of cosmic static, random noise, nothing unusual. Then at 11:16 p.m., something arrived. A radio signal so precisely structured, so perfectly matching the theoretical profile of what an extraterrestrial transmission should look like, that when volunteer astronomer Jerry Emmon reviewed the printout 3 days later, he grabbed a red pen and wrote one word in the margin next to the data: "Wow." The signal lasted exactly 72 seconds. It arrived at a frequency of 1420 megahertz, the frequency of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. The frequency scientists had theorized for decades would be the logical choice for any civilization attempting to communicate across interstellar distances, because any sufficiently advanced species would know hydrogen, would know its spectral frequency, and would understand it as a universal reference point. The signal had a signal-to-noise ratio of 30:1. Background cosmic noise typically registers at 1:1. The wow signal was 30 times stronger than anything in the background. It was, by every measurable standard, exactly what a signal from an extraterrestrial civilization would look like if one were trying to be heard. It has never been detected again, in 47 years of trying. Not for lack of effort. The Big Ear telescope returned to the same coordinates hundreds of times. Other radio telescopes around the world pointed at the same patch of sky. The most sophisticated radio astronomy equipment ever built has been directed at that region. The signal has never repeated, never returned, never confirmed, but also never explained. Nobody has identified a natural source that could have produced it. Nobody has found an interference pattern that accounts for it. Nobody has demonstrated convincingly that the wow signal was anything other than what it appeared to be when Jerry Emmons circled it in red ink. That fact, 47 years of failed natural explanation combined with 47 years of failed redetection, is what makes the wow signal one of the most important and most frustrating scientific mysteries in history. Let me give you the metaphor that carries through all of this. Imagine you've been sitting in a quiet room for 3 years listening to the same background hum. You know every frequency, every variation. Then one night, for exactly 72 seconds, a clear, structured tone comes through that is completely distinct from everything you've been hearing. It matches every characteristic you'd theorized a meaningful signal would have, and then it stops, and the background hum returns, and it never happens again. You spend the next 47 years listening harder, running every natural explanation you can generate, and none of them account for what you heard. At what point do you stop assuming the explanation will eventually come and start sitting seriously with what you actually detected? That is the situation the wow signal has put science in. Here are the signal's specific characteristics, because understanding them separates honest scientific assessment from comfortable dismissal. The signal arrived at exactly 1420.4056 MHz, the exact emission frequency of neutral hydrogen. In the 1950s, physicists Philip Morrison and Giuseppe Cocconi wrote the foundational paper in SETI research arguing that any civilization attempting to broadcast across interstellar distances would almost certainly use the hydrogen line frequency. Their reasoning was never seriously challenged. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. Every technological civilization, regardless of biology or location, would encounter it first. Any sufficiently advanced receiver anywhere would be monitoring that channel. The wow signal arrived at exactly that frequency, not approximately, exactly. The signal also showed the frequency drift pattern consistent with a source fixed in the sky rather than on Earth or in orbit. It showed the characteristic rise and fall in signal strength produced by a radio source as the telescope's beams swept across it and moved past. This is called the expected beam pattern, and the wow signal matched it precisely. It behaved in every technically measurable way like something out there rather than something nearby. The bandwidth was extremely narrow. Natural astrophysical sources emit across broad frequency ranges. The WOW signal was confined to a narrow band centered on the hydrogen frequency in a way more consistent with deliberate transmission than with natural emission processes. Now let me walk through the natural explanations that have been proposed and why each has failed. The first is terrestrial radio interference. This fails for a specific technical reason. Terrestrial interference doesn't produce the beam pattern the WOW signal showed. The big ear used two feed horns separated by several minutes of arc. A genuine sky source would be detected sequentially by each horn as the telescope rotated across it. The WOW signal was detected by one horn and not the other, exactly what you'd expect from a point source in the sky. Terrestrial interference would typically be detected by both horns or in a pattern that didn't match the single source sky signature. The signal behaved like a sky source, not an interference source. The second is natural astrophysical phenomenon. No natural astrophysical object at the signal's coordinates has been identified that could produce emission at that frequency with that signal strength. The region has been studied extensively. There is no candidate. Additionally, no natural radio sources that emit near the hydrogen frequency tend to emit rather than absorb at that specific frequency. Getting a strong, clear signal through the galaxy at exactly the hydrogen line is actually quite difficult for natural sources. The third explanation, proposed in 2016, is that the signal came from comets passing through the field. Researcher Antonio Paris suggested two comets were near the signal's origin coordinates at the time. This received significant media attention. It subsequently failed. Multiple astronomers demonstrated that comets don't emit radio signals at the hydrogen frequency at intensities anywhere near the WOW signal's strength. The physics of cometary hydrogen emission simply doesn't produce 30-to-1 signal-to-noise ratios at radio frequencies. The comet hypothesis was not adopted by the scientific community. The signal remained unexplained. The failure of each natural explanation doesn't prove the signal was artificial. It means we don't have a satisfying natural explanation. Those are different things. But 47 years of failed explanations applied to a signal matching the theoretical extraterrestrial profile with remarkable precision creates an evidentiary situation that deserves honest acknowledgement. Now the question everyone asks: if the signal was real, why hasn't it repeated? There are serious answers that don't require dismissing the signal's significance. A civilization using significant energy to transmit interstellar might broadcast periodically rather than continuously, sweeping through different directions over time. If the transmission period is longer than 47 years, we wouldn't have heard it again yet. Alternatively, an energy-efficient narrow beam targeted at specific stars would explain why we heard it once. A narrow beam doesn't repeat in the same way an omnidirectional broadcast does. You'd need to be in the beam at the right time. We may have been. We may not be right now. What makes the 72-second duration particularly interesting is that it's not consistent with random interference. Terrestrial interference has no reason to conform to the telescope's geometry. It would not conveniently start and stop at exactly the moments that filled the detection window. The fact that the signal filled the detection window precisely is actually evidence against a random event. It is evidence for a sky-fixed source that the telescope's rotation carried it across, which is exactly what you'd expect from something genuinely out there. Here's the broader context that makes the WOW signal more significant than it usually appears in isolation. The Kepler Space Telescope has shown that planets are extraordinarily common. Virtually every star has them. A significant fraction sit in habitable zones where liquid water could exist. The galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars and is 13 billion years old. A civilization that arose a billion years before us would have had a billion years of technological development. From our perspective, that is essentially incomprehensible. What they could transmit across the galaxy exceeds anything we can meaningfully imagine. Against that backdrop, a 72-second signal at the hydrogen frequency arriving once from the direction of Sagittarius is not a probability-defying impossibility. It is a data point in a universe vast enough and old enough that data points of this kind are not extraordinary in principle. The Square Kilometre Array, currently under construction in South Africa and Australia, will be the most powerful radio telescope ever built. If something is transmitting anywhere in the galaxy at detectable power levels, the probability of catching it is about to increase by orders of magnitude. The WOW signal may remain a one-time anomaly. It may also be the first data point in a set that is about to grow. What I keep coming back to is this. On August 15, 1977, something arrived. It came from a fixed point in the sky. It arrived at the frequency every physicist has independently concluded would be the logical transmission frequency for any civilization trying to be heard. It lasted exactly as long as the telescope could have detected it. It was 30 times stronger than the cosmic background. It matched every technical criterion for what an intentional transmission would look like. Jerry Emmons circled it in red pen and wrote one word. And then 47 years passed. We listened. We ran every natural explanation through the data. None of them stuck. The signal didn't repeat. The sky stayed quiet. The honest scientific position, stated without comfortable vagueness, is this. The WOW signal has characteristics matching the theoretical profile of an intentional interstellar transmission with a precision that has not been explained by any natural source in 47 years. Every proposed natural explanation has either failed technically or lacks the observational support to be considered resolved. The honest conclusion is that we don't know what produced it. Not that it was aliens, not that it definitely wasn't, that we don't know, and that we should be investing more seriously in the infrastructure to find out. Because the alternative is sitting with the world's most interesting unexplained data point for another 47 years and calling it a mystery.